Welcome to Industry Insights with Route Consultant, your front row seat to the fast-moving world of logistics and beyond. Each week, we bring you game-changing insights, real-world strategies, and fresh perspectives to fuel smarter investments and build stronger businesses. Join us as we sit down with expert guests to explore emerging trends and pressing topics across a wide range of industries. This is Industry Insights. Hey everyone, welcome to Industry Insights. This is a special episode that was actually recorded live at the Route Consultant Expo in 2026. We're releasing this over time so that if you weren't at the expo, or if you missed the session, or if you're just catching up, these are all coming out over the course of the year so that you can go back and watch this content and make sure that you see everything that we went over at the expo. Today we're going to hear from Alex Frum about why it is crucial for Linehaul Contractors to have a clear employee handbook.
Good afternoon, everybody. If you missed my earlier session, my name is Alex Frum. I'm an existing TSP. I've been doing this for 6 years, or 7 years now, I guess. I keep losing track of time. I'm based in Memphis, Tennessee, Olive Branch, Mississippi, and Independence, Kentucky. I have 37 tractors, 30 runs. I run both teams and solos by myself, and then with my partner, John Barnes, we have another 39 tractors in Richmond, Virginia, and in Olive Branch, Mississippi, where we mostly run spots. I really would love to have a really exciting presentation to give you, but we're going to dive down into the weeds and talk about why it's important to have an employee handbook, and what can an employee handbook do for you. Before I get going, though, I do need to read this disclaimer. Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. So, why do you need an employee handbook? If you do anything as a new contractor or as an existing contractor, you need to have an employee handbook. Not only is it pretty much a requirement by FedEx if you read between the lines in the contract, but when you buy your EPLI or employment liability insurance, they're going to expect that you have an employee handbook, okay? Employee handbooks are what protects you from getting sued. It's what protects your business, and to a great degree is going to make sure that you have the right culture, policies, and procedures in place when you run your operation. So you're going to have a lot of different things in your employee handbook, but the biggest thing that you're going to have is you want to communicate with your employees and regularly update it as the laws and regulations change, your employee handbook, to communicate your expectations of what you expect about your employees and what they can expect from you. It's kind of like, almost like a contract. It's, this is how I run my corporation. This is what the job requirements are. This is what I'm going to expect from you on a daily basis, and then this is what you can expect from me. Additionally, it prevents you from treating your employees differently. And if you discriminate on your employees, you can go to jail. So the last thing you want to do is open yourself up to treating employees differently and then face discrimination lawsuits. Okay? So you want to standardize your rules, you want to standardize your conduct, you want to standardize your benefits, and you want to standardize your procedures so all your employees are treated the same, whether they're black, white, brown, male, female, straight, trans, whatever. You want to treat all your employees the same way. Okay, so what should be in your employee handbook? Okay, this list is not everything. I kind of summarize a lot of the high points, but there are federal, state, in some states you might have local, but then there are FedEx requirements of what they expect in your employee handbook. Each state is different. I cannot give you my employee handbook and say, hey, Dave in Georgia, go ahead and run with my employee handbook in Georgia, because the requirements in Tennessee, Kentucky, Mississippi, Illinois, and Colorado are different. At the federal level, obviously they all say the same, but at the state level, the language utilized in your employee handbook or from the state requirements and regulations are going to be different. So while the intent might be the same about what your EEOC policy is, the language each state utilizes is different, and to protect yourself and your company from frivolous lawsuits, you want to make sure that you capture that information correctly. Now, the great thing is you don't need to do this by yourself, okay? Your EPLI insurance provider or your benefits manager or your payroll provider generally provides this service free of charge, okay? They will provide you with legal advice on what you need to have in your state or at the federal level or at the local level in these documents, okay? But at a minimum, in your employee handbook, you need to have an equal opportunity chapter. You need to have immigration law compliance. That's the I-9 or E-Verify that FedEx requires us. That comes from the federal government. Standard of conduct and ethical practices, that comes from FedEx. Remember, you cannot steal packages. That's a no-no. You know, I mean, you want to make sure that you let your drivers know that's a no-no. Anti-demonstration, that's federal and state. Anti-harassment, that's federal and state. Anti-retaliation, that's federal and state. Drug and alcohol, that's all three. Workplace violence, that's all three. Guns at work is the big one with FedEx. You cannot have you cannot have guns or knives over, I think, 4 inches on a FedEx facility. That is a ban for life if one of your employees gets caught with a gun on a FedEx facility. And then reporting threats, that's all three. Additionally, you want to cover certain other items that are requirements for EPLI and then just protect you again from liability. And those include workplace injuries, employee classifications, timekeeping procedures, employment records, and drug testing. Now, the great thing is that I partnered with Route Consultants. I gave them my employee handbook. It's actually 67 pages long. They've slimmed it down and took away a lot of the stuff that I have about how I run my operation and kind of dumbed it down to be like, these are the minimum things that you can have in your employee handbook to be compliant with the federal, state, and FedEx requirements. And then from there, it allows you to add back components that talk about your culture, your policies, and your procedures into it. And so we're going to dive into this, but if you if you go to the Route Consultants booth, they have a generic copy of an employee handbook that you can build off upon. So what is an employee handbook for? Well, other than protecting you, it's one of the primary ways you can establish your culture. You can communicate your expectations to your employees, make clear to them what your priorities are and how you want to operate. Okay, what are your expectations about attire, behavior, minimum performance requirements? In my company, for example, and you'll see in another slide, I have a requirement on what they're allowed to wear when they come to work. I require all my drivers to wear closed-toed shoes with a non-slip surface. Why do I do that? You go in the back, you got David Campbell back there, a nice little gentleman. He will tell you the number one injury that you get in Linehaul is slips and falls, okay? If you're not wearing closed-toed shoes with a non-slip surface, you're opening yourself up to workers' comp claims, okay? Your employee handbook is there to protect you and your business as much as it is to protect your employees and make sure that you don't get sued. What are your disciplinary guidelines? What are your attendance expectations? For example, in my employee handbook, I have a job abandonment clause. For the states I operate in, I have a clause that says that if you do not show up to work, I can consider it job abandonment, which means that they've quit. And so like if if I terminate them for not showing up to work, I don't have to pay unemployment benefits. Thank you. Every state is different. There are right-to-work states. There are non-right-to-work states. So, this is a clause that I can utilize because I happen to operate in Kentucky and Tennessee and Mississippi. If I employed people in Illinois, which I don't, I'm just organized there, I wouldn't be able to have that clause in my employee handbook. Vehicle expectations. What are my expectations about what they do in their vehicle, how they leave the vehicle, where they put their equipment, where the vehicle binders go, how do they have to keep it clean, where do the keys go? I lock all my vehicles at night because I happen to operate in Memphis, and as Al can tell you, there's a lot of break-ins in Memphis. So I require all my drivers to lock their vehicles and put the vehicle keys in a lockbox to prevent my vehicles from getting broken into. Your welcome message. This is where you establish your culture. This is actually the welcome message that I have in my employee handbook. Okay? This is who I am. This is what my company is all about. This is what my expectations are. This is why you want to come work for me. That's what you're trying to establish with your welcome message. Hours of service. It's not a requirement to have in your employee handbook. I list the hours of service requirements in my employee handbook because I believe compliance and safety is so important. So it's a reference for all my drivers because even though they're commercial drivers and they're professionals, there are a lot of them who know the basic rules about hours of service but don't know all the differences between being in personal conveyance versus being on duty versus being off duty versus being on duty but not driving. So I clarify and take it straight from the FMCSA exactly what the hours of service rules are and when they can use the different extensions because there are some flexibility in the hours of service if your driver has a mechanical breakdown or if there is unforeseen weather or traffic accidents that allows you to do an extension. So I clarify what are the procedures and how you can use your 2-hour drive time extension or your 2-hour duty day extension. So everything is in there in my hours of service. I also clarify and explain to my drivers why I do not authorize personal conveyance. Okay, so my drivers are not allowed to utilize personal conveyance. I actually have to toggle it, or my managers actually have to toggle it back on for my drivers to utilize it. Why? Because a number of years ago, I had a driver get busted for a CSA violation for driving on the road under a load in personal conveyance. So I took it away from all my drivers. So I'd never have that happen again. Because I had to provide a letter of assurance to FedEx that I would never ever have a driver driving in personal conveyance. So a lot of these things are, protection for me from getting in trouble with FedEx or protection of my drivers so that they don't get in trouble with the law. I explain what the video event device recorder, because I'm organized in Illinois, there is a requirement for me to let them know that I'm recording them. So I have a disclaimer in there that says, hey, you're being videotaped. This data is going to be shared with FedEx. So I explain to them that, and then on top of that, I explain to them, what am I checking for? What is the purpose of a video event device recorder? Your drivers think it's big business or big blue or big brother looking over the shoulder. No. The VETR system is actually to protect them from frivolous lawsuits, okay, and to protect Alpha Kilo, my company, or Marlin Express, my other company, from being in trouble with the law, okay? I want to show that my drivers is driving down the road and that when I got into an accident, they merged with me, not the other way around. I also explain what are my key indicators. Why do I explain what my key indicators are? Because I actually pay to my drivers a safety bonus. And if they violate these key indicators, this is how they lose their safety bonus. So I spell it out for them. If I catch you driving and using a cell phone, I'll take away your safety bonus. If I catch you not driving with a seatbelt, not only is it dangerous for you if you get into an accident, you can get thrown from the cab of the vehicle, but it's a violation of FedEx policy, and so that means it's a violation of my company policy. If I catch you speeding, all my tractors are governed at 65, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of highways that are not 65, and so if I catch you not following the speed rules, I can get in trouble with FedEx, so that means you can get in trouble with FedEx. Following distance, camera obstruction are the other two. And then I explain to them, what are my coaching procedures? How am I going to coach? How often are you going to get coached? And what does it mean that you're getting coached? I do all my coaching one-on-one. I have my managers have a tablet that they can download the video and they can review the video with the driver face-to-face. I don't send them by email. I don't text them to my drivers. We actually do a face-to-face coaching session. And my managers actually, as part of my employee handbook, have to document that they've done a coaching session. And then what are the consequences? That's where I take away their safety bonus. But I also clarify, and this is more for me, I clarify what are the benefits that they get from my company. So what are the healthcare benefits? What are the vision and dental benefits that I provide? How does the 401k program work? What is my PTO? I don't have a vacation policy. I have a PTO policy. And that's because, again, the states that I operate in, if I offer vacation, then on top of that, I have to offer a sick leave. But because of the states I operate in, if I call my time off PTO, vacation or sick leave are one and the same. Now, one of the things that's different for me, and if anybody here is in California, my guys own their vacation day, and so if they don't utilize it all, I actually have to compensate them for unused vacation. So I buy back any unused PTO. So again, that's state by state specific. So you need to be understanding of that. Talking to your EPLI or talking to your payroll provider, you can get that wage and garnishment advice from a legal attorney that specializes in that work for that state. 401k, there are a lot of different types of 401ks out there. In my 401k, because I organized in Illinois, I am required to automatically enroll all my employees. They have to manually opt out. Because of that, I'm allowed to have a higher matching function than the normal state allowances allow. So in my 401k, I opt all my drivers in at 7% automatically, and then that allows me to match up to 3.5% of any contribution they put in for themselves or for me. Now, I'll be honest with you. The reason why I have a 401k program, I'm trying to do well for my drivers, but more importantly, is for me. I want the 401k program because I understand the power of investing. I put money in now, and in 25 or 30 years, it's going to be a lot more. So I use the 401k. I max it out. I max out my wife. I encourage all my drivers to max it out as much as possible. But I can tell you, the ones who really understand it are my managers. They've all maxed out on an annual basis their 401k. Okay, what else do you want to include in your employee handbook? This is what I include. It's not a mandatory, but this is how I handle it. Vehicle inspection procedures and or expectations. I happen to operate in the South. I have a lot of African American and Hispanic employees. To be honest, they are very stressed out when they go in for a DOT inspection. They are very stressed out when they get stopped by a DOT officer. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That's just the nature of the way. So we practice how to do an inspection. We practice how do you address a DOT officer to try to relieve the stress of them. And I lay out what my expectations about how they're going to handle the situation, and I walk them through it. In Kentucky, I have a bunch of Pakistani and Somali drivers. So I do the same thing with them. I practice with them so they're not going through a very stressful situation. Okay? DOT inspections, having to have a conversation with a DOT officer for a white person is not that big of a deal. For an African American or for a foreigner, it's a very stressful situation. So I lay out what are the guidelines, what are the rules, how do you handle yourself, how do you present yourself to that DOT officer to try to minimize any situation where I can have a CSA inspection or a CSA violation. I talk about the accident procedures. I really lay out very clearly what my accident procedures are. I do not want my drivers communicating to FedEx that we had an accident. They get into an accident, the first thing that they do is they put out their hazard lights. They check to make sure that they're okay, they're not injured, and then they go check to see if the other side is injured. Then they call my manager. Then we call the DOT or the highway patrol. And then once my manager and I have had a discussion, I report it up to FedEx. I want myself to be the one who's communicating to FedEx that we had an accident. Why? Because I am trying to categorize and clarify and narrate a process that in general relieves me at fault with FedEx, because FedEx standards for accidents are not the same standards that the insurance company uses. So FedEx believes, and rightly so, that all your drivers are professional drivers. So they are able to prevent accidents. In that situation, they have two categories, preventable and non-preventable accidents. So if an accident is preventable or non-preventable is very subjective to how FedEx views and is told of how the accident occurred. So if you communicate and narrate the story about how the accident occurs, a lot of times you can take an accident and make it non-preventable instead of being preventable. So you should own the accident reporting. Don't let your drivers do it. If you have a really good manager, you can have your manager do it. The other thing is you should all either buy or download the ATA's guide to determining accident preventability. The ATA stands for the American Trucking Association, and the guide clarifies the 12 different categories that an accident could be deemed preventable. Okay? And so that is what FedEx is supposed to use with their third-party vendor, which is, I can't think of the name, but that's who utilizes that system to determine if an accident is preventable or not. I talk about my safety training. What are the safety processes? What are the orientation? How do we go through everything? How often are they getting trained up? What happens when you have remedial training? So if I catch somebody having a safety violation, we go through remedial training. We talk about the explanation of per diem. I have drivers who are on the road overnight, so they get per diem. So what is the per diem rate? How is per diem calculated? I explain that out. And then I also have an entry-level driver training program. If you want to run an entry-level driver training program, FedEx wants to see your entry-level driver training program and what it consists of in your employee handbook. You have to submit the entire thing to FedEx in order to get approved for an entry-level driver training program. So those are the things that I have in my employee handbook. Can't really think about anything else that I'm missing in there right now. But like I said, it's a pretty robust document.
Hey guys, we just wanted to pause for a moment to invite you to our free events that are happening throughout the year. Whether you're just getting started in the logistics industry or you're looking to optimize your current operation, Route Consultant has events that are designed specifically for you. So head on over to routeconsultant.com/events or check out our show notes to register for free today. Also, while you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Industry Insights with Route Consultant podcast so that you don't miss out on the stories, the advice, and the updates that are happening throughout the industry. We appreciate you being here and hope to meet you in person soon. Now let's get back to the episode.
A copy of every single one of my employee handbooks is located in two places. One, it's online. So I happen to use ADP, but I know Paychex does the same thing, and I think some of the other payroll providers do. So they have an online copy of their employee handbook. Every single time I update my employee handbook, my driver, when he goes in to look at their pay stub online, has to acknowledge that he's received the update, which means that it makes it legally binding for that employee then. The other location that the employee handbook is located is in my vehicle binders. So every single one of my vehicles has a vehicle binder. It has the cab card in there. It has my insurance, it has FedEx's insurance, it has my accident procedures, it has my toll, it has my IFTA, it has my vehicle inspection report, and then on top of that, at the back of it is a copy of the employee handbook. Why is it there? Is because so they can reference it if they have an accident. They can reference it if they slip and fall when they get into on the yard. So it's readily available for my driver. So I try to provide it to my employees to protect myself from liability. Okay? I know this was a really dry material. It's not as exciting about growing, but this is just every bit as important to make sure that you protect yourself and your business, because you made a huge investment when you got into this space, and you want to make sure that you're protected all along. If you talk to the guys in green, they have, like I said, a very generic copy. It's a good base to start your employee handbook, and then you can make it into what you want it to be and how you want to communicate to your drivers. At this time, I'll take some questions. Yes?
Do you have a separate safety compliance book as well to the employee handbook?
Okay, so the question was, there's a lot of safety components to my employee handbook, and do I have a separate safety compliance guide? No. So my employee handbook contains all my safety messaging, all my safety rules, all my accident procedures. It's all in one space. I try to make it as simple as possible for my employees so they don't have multiple materials that they need to reference. As we scale into 2.0 and we are required to start pulling Hazmat, for FedEx, I will update my employee handbook to include the Hazmat rules that we operate under. That is something that many of you guys might not know, but as part of 2.0, Federal Express Corporation, the old FedEx Express drivers, pulled hazardous material. Most of it was pharmaceuticals, and ammunition. When we start pulling 2.0 loads, we will have to have we have to be able to pull that hazmat stuff as well. As you go to 2.0, I will have to update my employee handbook. I'm not in any 2.0 networks yet, but I will update it with the TSA security requirements to make sure I'm in compliance with that. And because our drivers are expected to be TSA compliant to be able to pull express loads, I will update my employee handbook to reflect that information. Yes, sir.
Any other incident investigation training you guys do to your employees if accident happens or if they fall and slip or anything else that can go wrong, right? If they didn't have enough sleep.
So, I mean, there's a. So if you're, I mean, sorry, what was the exact question?
Almost I forgot. So any other incident investigation training, basically, for reporting or for insurance liability or for workers' comp, anything related to that?
Okay, so I heavily rely on my insurance providers for that kind of, for the investigative procedures. So FedEx uses a company called ARC, which is their, actually I'm not even sure if it's a company, but it's their accident reporting procedures committee that does the investigation on the FedEx side. At the same time, when we have an accident, my insurance provider does a deep dive into what were the root causes of the accident. Was it mechanical? Was it driver error? Based off of the information that we get from reviewing the safety video, the video history of the event, and after having a discussion with my workers' comp and non-trucking liability insurance provider, then we'll determine if we need to have adjustments to our policies or need to do remedial training with all our employees. But based off of the guidance that we get from FedEx, and I do spend a lot of time reviewing the FedEx has, depending on the hub that you're in, you're going to have monthly safety meetings with your hub manager, and a lot of time listening to that, they always report all the accidents that occurred in the network. So one of the reasons why I do Goal T, which we talked about in my previous session. So when I do a dock pull, I do get out and look and touch. And the reason why I'm adjusted the procedures that FedEx wants you to utilize when you do a dock pull is because they were still having so many different dock pull accidents or pull-offs. So I made a change to my policies to try to prevent those dock pulls, and I've never had a dock pull or a pull-off since then, or ever, because I require all my drivers to verify by touching the doors that the doors are closed. So does that answer your question? Okay.
Hey, Alex. Hey, thanks for doing these. I had a question about PPE. Do you provide, I think you touched on boots, but do you provide any sort of other PPE? Vests,
so the question is PPE, which is a military term for personal protective equipment. So I provide all my drivers, actually I provide all my drivers with a lot of stuff. But in and of itself, I provide all my drivers with safety vests. So you're required, for FedEx policy, you're required to use a safety vest when you're on the yard. In my company, anytime you're on duty and out of the truck, you're required to wear a safety vest. So if you're getting fuel at a pilot, you need to wear a safety vest. A lot of my drivers drive at night, and I want them to be safe when they're on the road. So all my safety vests actually say Alpha Kilo on it. It's free advertising for me. And it makes it really easy for FedEx to see that my guys are doing the right thing. I also provide my drivers with Alpha Kilo branded. I'm wearing you can't see it, but I'm wearing a short sleeve shirt that has my logo on it. I provide all my drivers with hoodies, sweatshirts, jackets, cold weather gear, rain jackets. I do an annual gift to my drivers of, it's kind of like a driver appreciation, but it's all protective gear. So it's all ANSI yellow with high-vis silver piping on it. Instead of doing the FedEx branded stuff, one, I can get it cheaper than FedEx can, and two, if FedEx is not compensating me, if FedEx is not compensating me to have my drivers wear a uniform, then they're going to wear my uniform and not their uniform. So all my drivers are wearing jackets. I mean, if you come up to me, I can show you. I give my guys Carhartt jackets when they win Driver of the Year awards. I do as much as I can to market within the hub and within the FedEx community to make sure that FedEx knows that, hey, that's an Alpha Kilo guy, you know, on the yard, and he's doing the right thing, and that's how I win, you know. What I want to be in the grand scheme of things in my culture is, or in my company, is that when FedEx needs a load pulled, and it's not coming off the unassigned board, it's not coming off the dedicated run list, they just have some extra work that they need, you know, Alex is the first one that they're going to call for that load. And so by, you know, and for me, it's all marketing within the FedEx community. Oh, I also provide headlamps. So like just like the camping spotlights, I provide gloves that have reflective material on them. All my trucks are equipped with tire gauges. I also provide all my trucks are equipped with a fifth wheel puller. If you talk to a workers' comp insurance provider, after slips and falls and banging your thumb or getting your thumb squeezed in the pintle hook, the third most common injury is a dislocated shoulder from disengaging the fifth wheel. So I'm always talking to my workers' comp provider and trying to figure out, okay, what are the most common injuries that you're seeing in trucking, and then looking for ways to mitigate that risk. And so I try to eliminate my workers' comp claims as much as possible. And I think I've done a good job because at the end of the day, I use a lot of the resources that you get from your insurance providers in crafting my employee handbook and establishing the policy and procedures. And the idea there is to try to eliminate your workers' comp claims as much as possible. And so based off of that guidance from talking to guys like Dave Campbell in the back, they've given me tips and equipment to utilize to minimize that. And over 7 years, I've had $30,000 in claims, which is very low for a trucking company. Yep.
You had mentioned Hazmat with the TSA and the 2.0. Right now, we do pull Hazmat. It's just under that 1,000 pounds. Is that, with the 2.0, is that going to be where we're required to get a Hazmat endorsement?
So it hasn't been totally clear from FedEx. I've been asked to have 2 drivers of mine who are doing runs from an airport get their Hazmat endorsement. So when you're pulling pharmaceuticals from the airports, you know, from the ramps, FedEx has given me indications that those drivers will need to have their Hazmat endorsements. But I think it's going to be more on a case-by-case basis with FedEx. I've been pushing back, you know, just between you and me, I've been pushing back on FedEx because it's a very costly endorsement to get. It's a couple $100s to buy the books, and then I think it's depending on the state, it can be upwards of $185 to take the test to get your endorsement, and then you have an annual requirement to get recertified every year. And so I've been pushing back. I mean, I did 2 drivers, but I've been pushing back to FedEx that they have to compensate us for that endorsement. Did I put everybody to sleep with this presentation?
Is there a point where you need a yard or parking space for trucks?
No. So FedEx, well, I take that back. In every hub area, there is a parking facility where you can park your trucks that is large enough for your trucks to be in. So understand that there are different size hubs and stations within the FedEx community, okay? And there are some stations that are too small or during peak become too congested where it becomes unsafe at times for your drivers to try to park and still utilize the facility. So depending on it, if you're in a hub, which are the large parent hub or parent structures for each hub area, they have plenty of space. Even Memphis, being a building that was built in the 1980s, is big enough to park. They have an off-site location for parking. It just happens to be extraordinarily unsafe in the location because they've had a lot of break-ins. But they do provide you with a parking lot. But if you go to some of these smaller stations, Kremlin, Colorado, Scranton, Pennsylvania. Actually, Scranton, Pennsylvania is a very big station. It just doesn't have a whole lot of yard space. North Cincy, they have off-site parking. And in a lot of those situations, contractors have looked for additional parking because the facilities are kind of unsafe, especially during peak. I think the North Cincy location happens to be at the bottom of a hill, and it's kind of treacherous to try to drive down to the bottom of the hill during snow and ice. So in those situations, I've heard and know of managers who decided to, or owners decided to get different parking. But if you're in a main hub, if you're in Woodbridge, Atlanta, Savannah, Rialto, Portland, the big locations, they have plenty of parking. Is that it, guys? You can ask me anything else if you want. I'm here all day.
Off topic, but I was wondering if you've had any of your runs affected by the FedEx freight that's going on trains, how you've handled that. I know a lot of team runs have been affected by that.
So I happen to be in the perfect location not to be affected by train runs because I'm in the Midwest, or I'm in the middle of the United States. And so the understanding, to understand what's going on with why FedEx is moving runs over. So if it's a 3-day or longer run, so the freight does not need to be in somebody's hands until day 4 or day 5, those loads can be moved to the rails because that gives them the flexibility to get anywhere in the country by rail. So it happened to be, where I am, my run time to California from Mississippi or from Memphis means that I can do that run within 24 hours, and so it can be in the customer's hands on day 3, and so that doesn't make it eligible. But if I was going from Woodbridge to Rialto, that's a load that can get shipped across the United States by rail because of how long it takes for the packages to get to the customer's hands. So, does that answer your question? Yeah, it's been, so where it starts happening is when the run gets over 2,000 miles in a single leg, that run time for that 2,000 mile run pushes it into day 4 that the freight has to be in the customer hands. And so that stuff makes it more efficient for FedEx to move it by rail than by truck. And just so everybody understands, rail is the cheapest way to move freight across the country. It's not the fastest way, but it is the cheapest way. And at the end of the day, FedEx is a business that's trying to move packages as efficiently as possible across the country. Now, depending on the station or the terminal that you're in those situations where FedEx has cannibalized runs and put it on rail, a lot of those runs have been redesignated into something different. So if I had a run that was supposed to go from Savannah to California, I might have lost my Savannah to California run, but I might have picked up a Savannah to Lehigh run instead, which is not something. The other thing I understand is that the rail lines in the United States make it very difficult for you to go north-south via rail. It's really easy to go east-west via rail. It's really hard to go north-south. So a lot of the team runs, if you're looking to acquire team runs because you want the extra miles and the better profit margins that you get, buying north-south team runs are runs that are never going to go away unless the demographics in the United States change. Maybe everybody's going to move out of Minnesota because it's really cold there, and they all move to Florida, then it's a different story. You like being in cold Minnesota? But understand that, FedEx doesn't want to take away your runs, but there are times when the customer situation changes. It's one of the reasons why FedEx has struggled to put spots on your A1, because there's no guarantee that Nike is going to stay a customer of FedEx, every 18 months. And FedEx typically strikes 18-month contracts with their customers. And so at the end of the day, FedEx competes with UPS, USPS, DHL, and, Joe Schmo and 2 trucks to move freight across the country. And so there are times when they will lose that Nike contract. And if that's the situation, then those spots that service Nike are going to go away. Yes, sir.
With the changes that are happening through FedEx with rail and so forth, are you focusing on a particular area like solos or spots or that sort of thing? So what's your preference now?
So honestly, my preference is that I have a significant amount of my revenue that's tied into line haul or over the road. I'm actually probably overexposed to over the road, and I'm trying to balance out my business by buying more, or move more hub area and more spots. The margin, I mean, they're all really good business models, but I mean, I do 100,000 miles a week over the road. I don't do a whole lot of spots. So, you know, if I'm looking at my mix, I'd rather be probably, I'd love to get to the point where I'm at least 70-30 spots between spots and over the road. I don't happen to operate any stations, so I'm trying to also look for opportunities to grow into stations. I happen to be only in hubs. So I'm in the Noki hub, I'm in the Memphis hub, I'm in the Olive Branch hub. I don't operate any stations, and stations give you different flexibility. There are pluses and minuses to everything. Like everything of mine is dedicated. It's really easy to convert an unassigned run into a dedicated run in a hub. If you're in a station, you might be the guy that runs to Tupelo, Mississippi every single day of the week. But the problem is that they're never going to put it on your contract because a lot of stations are managed by P&D managers and they just don't understand how line haul works. So you might be the Tupelo, Mississippi guy and you might run it, but your run probably is going to be unassigned. So there are pluses and minuses to it, but there is a certain amount of, I mean, the stations are smaller and it's a lot harder to break into. And so you might be only competing with one other contractor or two other contractors. And so if you're Mr. Reliable, then you're going to get a lot more business. You know, where I'm in Noki, there's 27 other contractors that I'm competing with. And while I think Chad really likes me, there's no guarantee that he's not going to turn around to somebody else and say, hey, I got this, hot freight that I need to move. Can I offer it to you? But when you're in the station and there's only one of three of you, if you become Mr. Reliable, you can get the majority. There's no scale in a station. There's scales in a hub, but there's no scales in a station. Like I know a guy in Rockford. I think he has 40 tractors in Rockford. There's two other contractors that have 3 tractors in Rockford. You know. Okay. Well, appreciate everybody's time. As I mentioned, Route Consultants has a generic version of the employee handbook. It's really important. I really encourage you guys all to spend, if you don't have an employee handbook, spend the next year developing your employee handbook. It's going to protect you from a lot of liability claims.